A modulated line, a line changing in thickness, can also suggest volume. Volumetric shapes like cubes, cones, and cylinders create the illusion of depth. Many volumes together can create the illusion of a recessional space. A gradual or progressive change from one color to another, or a progressive shift in tone or value from dark to light or light to dark, can contribute to the illusion of spatial depth or motion. If you observe a landscape receding from you, you'll note its hues and tones change due to the effect of the atmosphere. The atmosphere affects how we perceive hues and tones seen in the distance. The interposition of the atmosphere between the things seen and us changes how we perceive form and color. Pictorially, this effect is called atmospheric perspective, an illusion that approximates and simulates the effect the atmosphere has on color, shape, form, texture, and detail seen from a distance. In print and on any static digital page, motion is an illusion created through skillful manipulation. A composition can look still, suggest motion, or suggest intervals of stillness and movement. The illusion of movement can be suggested through active relationships such as diagonal counterpoints, acute shifts in scale, extreme value contrasts, and more. In time-based media such as motion graphic and animation, motion occurs from frame to frame over time. Contrast is your friend. We understand concave when it's next to convex. Straight looks straighter compared to crooked. In music, we understand loud in contrast to soft. There are two overarching purposes for differentiating graphic elements: to create visual variety and interest, and to compare the dissimilarity of elements by contrast. To differentiate between graphic elements in a design, you have to establish a difference between two or more. You must make distinctions. For example, if you intend to mix typefaces, it would be logical to mix two typefaces that are not too similar, like putting a serif with a sans serif so that people can distinguish them. One purpose of using more than one typeface is to create visual variety. Another purpose is to differentiate parts of the text, headings, from the main body of the rest. Through variation and contrast, you establish visual interest. Johannes Itten, an artist, professor, author, and color and design theoretician, held to a theory of structural and compositional oppositions, which he referred to as polar contrasts. Big and small, long and short, straight and curved, pointed and blunt, much, little, light and heavy, hard and soft. His polar contrasts have the potential for visual drama, enabling the viewer to better understand each graphic element through comparison. We understand a bright color compared to dull colors. We understand a rough texture contrasts to smooth, and so on. Imagine if an actor delivered all of her or his lines in monotone, without any variation. It would be like a design without contrast. Some variation adds visual interest. When one or more elements differs in visual characteristics, that's color, shape, form, texture, value, or size, or in treatment or in position, being isolated versus grouping, then variation is established. We could add other extremes to Itten's list: compress to stretch, bright color to dull color, colorful to gray, light to dark, dense to sparse, twisted to straight, irregular to regular, hold to subtle, dynamic or static, disharmonious to harmonious, disorderly and orderly, sharp and dull, night and day, organic and geometric, understated to exaggerated, whole to fragment, transparent to opaque, flat to deep. In the 1920s, a group of German psychologists proposed theories to explain how people perceived and organized visual information. The Gestalt principles of perception, you remember those. Similarity, proximity, continuity, and closure explain how people tend to understand what they see by grouping, by visually assembling images, and how they relate to one another into groups. Grouping is a fundamental Gestalt concept, proposing that when graphic elements appear similar, that they share characteristics and are arranged close together, they're connected, or are enclosed in a common spatial area, we perceive them as belonging together. Groups can be formed in a variety of ways. If you understand how grouping functions, you can more easily create visual emphasis in a composition through differentiation. One graphic element can be emphasized, become the focal point by differentiating it from the other graphic elements. Through contrast, weight, color, rhythm, orientation, and more. Composing is a process where you achieve a desired result by repeating a sequence of steps and successfully getting closer to the result. If the result is point B, there are lots of ways to reach point B. You can get there by spontaneous means, by using proportional systems, or compositional structures. The compositional method you use depends on the project's specifications and your own method of composing and visualization. Composing is an iterative process. Iterations, or revising, usually happens at the same time as creating and producing. You're rethinking, revising as you work, and that's part of the creative process of composing. There are different methods for composing. There's spontaneous composing. It's mostly unplanned visualization and structuring, with the design concept driving the visualizing and composing. In the process of creating, shaping, moving, improvising, and experimenting with graphic elements, while utilizing the principles of composition as well as relying on your intuition and insights into the creative process, you form a composition. If spontaneous composing is too open-ended as a starting point, you can try sketching or experimenting using one of these as preliminary creative exercises. Play with form. Use contrast. Create the illusion of a three-dimensional space, movement, or sound. Exaggerate scale. Exaggerate near and far relationships. Manipulate images. Form unexpected juxtapositions. Use abstraction. Or play with the media. Try collage, photograms, photo montage. How about experimental materials, mixed media, painting, sculpture, 3D illustrations, photography. Play with historical styles, psychedelic, new wave. Look at designs from the past. Sketch in the style of an artist that you admire. When composing for a single surface format like a poster or a book or a magazine cover, consider the roles and interrelationships of type and images as a whole. Type-driven, image-driven, and visual-verbal synergy. Type-driven compositions emphasize type and de-emphasize the images, where type is the dominant force with images secondary. Type can be the only component of such a solution. Image-driven is an emphasis on image with a de-emphasis on type. Image is the hero and type is the subordinate to the image. An image-driven composition can have no text. Then there's type-image emblem, which is also called visual-verbal synergy. It's a synergistic relationship between the verbal message and the primary image. This mode is a fundamental means for advertising design and for book jacket design and posters. When you compose type and image, the two main graphic components, you arrange them to respond to one another and to the shape and edges of the format. Will type and image be fused? Will they appear next to each other, not touching? Will they touch? Will type run across the image? Type and image are fused when type is inseparable from the image. It's often positioned inside the primary image, creating a joined relationship. When type and image are fused, there is an automatic relationship. When they are fused in an organic, almost seamless relationship, they appear and operate as a single entity. If type runs across the image, the viewer reads the type while seeing the image behind it, as if the type were on a pane of glass over the image. Seeing both type and image simultaneously enhances the message. The type-image relationship is constructed this way for the purpose of communicating in unison. If type is positioned outside the image or adjacent to the image, the type is not placed inside the main image and it doesn't run over the main image, but it's placed outside the image within the remaining pictorial space of the format. The type may also be adjacent to the image. When type runs across an image, the relationship is evident through touching one another. When type and image are not fused or don't touch, their relationship must be arranged through alignment and flow. Consider how one leads to the other. Consider size relationships. Consider which element is dominant and which is subordinate. What's the focal point? Do you want the viewer to see the type or the image first? Designers who compose spontaneously optically seek naturally inherent ways to align type and images. They find movements within the graphic elements that can be paralleled or echoed and prospect for that occasion of sympathetic relationships among the forms where alignments could occur. Several basic alignments, flush left, flush right, centered, justified, help establish flow and unity. There are also wraparound or edge or internal alignments as well. A graphic design problem can be solved typographically or with images alone, but when type and image interact, then you have to determine how they will interact. Will a form of type and images share characteristics? Will the type and images work in opposition and be contrasted in style of visualization and or form? Will the type drive the composition? Will the image drive the composition? Will the type and images be organically intertwined? Will they touch, overlap, be juxtaposed, fuse? Will they be words that incorporate images or be images that incorporate words? Will one be the star and the other the supporting player? To best explain type and image integration, let's break it into categories. If it's a supporting partner relationship, a classic neutral typeface works cooperatively with the image, which has a starring role. For the sake of clarity and visual interest, the tendency is to allow either type or images to be the star, with other components acting in a more neutral fashion, like a supporting actor. Similarly, in a design, type might be the well-chosen sterile blank slate, and the visual furnishes the room. If both type and image attract our attention due to equal prominence, then focus is diffused or lost. Type is purposely understated in contrast to a strong visual statement where perhaps the visual is the big idea. This doesn't mean the type, or text for that matter, is given a diminutive role. It means the type simultaneously contextualizes the image and by its understatement bestows celebrity status to the image while being noble itself. In sympathetic type and image relationships, type and image possess shared or similar characteristics which produce harmony. The agreement in form enhances meaning. Type and image share apparent character and purpose. Congruence relies on agreement in shape, form, proportion, weights, widths, thin, thick strokes, lines, textures, positive and negative shapes, and time period. Type and images possess apparent differences, contrasting points of differentiation, contrasting or opposing qualities and characteristics in contrasting relationships. The contrast between type and image characteristics is purposeful and synergistic, producing a unique communication. This is the least utilized category because it is the most difficult to work out. There are two basic ways type and images work in contrast. Complementary relationships, where the typeface or hand-drawn type is chosen to work in opposition to or in juxtaposition to the image, relying on contrasts in shape, form, proportion, weights, and so on. Mixing styles and historical periods can also create contrast. In a formal ironic relationship, typeface and images are selected for incongruity, for an ironic effect.